Welcome to Business Innovators Radio, featuring industry influencers and trendsetters sharing proven strategies to help you build a better life right now.
Hello and welcome to the show. This is your host Neil Howe, and we are talking immigration today. Our special expert guest is Raymond Fasano. Mr. Fasano is a nationwide recognized authority on immigration law. His services range from helping people who have recently arrived in the United States that have faced persecution in their homeland to Fortune 500 executives who have an immigration need. Mr. Fasano has won many president decisions on the administrative and federal level and has written numerous articles and taught classes nationwide on this subject. Welcome to the show, Mr. Fasano.
It's good to be here. Thank you, Neil.
Well, let's get right into it. You are based in New York, and New York is definitely a busy place with lots of immigration issues, but what would you say that you concentrate on mainly in your practice?
Well, we have a full-service law firm. My particular strength would be representing people in deportation proceedings. These are people that have found their way in the United States. They may have entered legally through consular processing or some other visa processing, or they may have entered illegally, but for some reason they face the threat of deportation. And my job is to submit applications to the court that would prevent them from being deported because they may have accumulated some relief during the time that they stayed here.
And New York is well known for being an old port of entry into the United States, but how are people making their way to New York right now illegally? What kind of ethnicities do you see mainly, and who do you deal with mostly?
Well, it's funny because culturally, different countries have different means to enter the United States illegally, and I'm just going to focus on illegal entries at the moment. People from Central and South America typically find themselves entering the United States to the U.S.-Mexico border. I think it's common knowledge that people hire smugglers known as coyotes who get them to the border, and then people try to enter the United States undetected through the border, and then they're intercepted, held by immigration through Customs and Border Patrol, and they're held in facilities along the border in towns such as Harlingen, Texas, Dilley, Phoenix, and then normally what would happen is if a person has entered illegally, they are interviewed by an officer within the facility and asked whether they have any concerns or fears of return to their country. If you recall, last year we saw a surge of people fleeing Honduras, Guatemala, El Salvador, Nicaragua last summer, and it created a bottleneck in these border towns along the U.S.-Texas border. And in fact, it got to such a point last year that so many juveniles were being apprehended at the border with their mothers that Immigration and Customs Enforcement blew its budget that's supposed to carry them until October of last year, but they blew it in mid-July because of the amount of people that were entering. Now, there's various theories why we had a surge in illegal immigration at the border over the last 2 years, but the Department of State, I would say mid-year last year to the fall of last year, issued a travel warning, warning Americans not to travel to Nicaragua, Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador because of the level of street violence in those countries, specifically gang violence. And what's happened over the course of the last year is that the Department of State has what's known as in-country refugee status for juveniles, and that's kids that are under the age of 18 who reside in the countries of Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador. If these kids have parents in the United States that have a work permit, now, I'm going to get into this in a bit, but whether a person can have a work permit in the United States is not dependent upon their lawful status. And this is what created an impasse last week when the Supreme Court was hearing oral arguments regarding the president's DAPA program that was brought by the state of Texas against the Obama administration. Justice Alito got stuck on how can a person have a work permit in the United States if that individual is here unlawfully.
Mm-hmm.
It's possible, but in any event, what would happen is all a minor has to do is submit proof that their parents have a work permit in the United States, and they're automatically recognized as refugees at the U.S. consulate or embassy in those three countries, namely Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador. And that child can legally enter the United States as a refugee. He or she would wait 1 year, and then they could adjust to lawful permanent resident status. So culturally, those countries find themselves at the U.S.-Mexico border. There's a lot of Chinese immigration in the United States. And culturally, what individuals from China will do in order to arrive in the United States is they use bad documents, like they'll use somebody else's visa, somebody else's passport. There'll be stowaways on ships. They'll find ways to enter in that manner. And their goal is not to avoid being arrested the way individuals from Central and South America will do at the U.S.-Mexico border. Their goal would be to get arrested because culturally they're fleeing an autocratic government out of China, and there is tremendous, widespread human rights violations in China with respect to religious persecution, which is really getting out of control right now in China. So you'll see a lot of those people coming in that manner. But then, you'll have people who overstay visas in the United States that they here illegally. Countries like Dominican Republic, people will enter with legally with the tourist visa and they'll overstay. But in any event, getting back to your original question, somehow, some way, people end up in New York City, which really is a hub for where people end up landing, once they arrive in the United States. I know with the Chinese culture, people will find themselves in New York City because that's where they can most easily find jobs. There are job recruiters in New York City that will find a person work anywhere in the country, but the nerve center for that is New York City.
So immigration is always a point of contention. We have all these people that are leaking into our borders who have major problems in their own country, and they are trying to flee and get that refugee status. But when it comes to work, if they're illegal, what kind of work are they able to get? And is it a better standard of living? How are they living here working illegally?
Again, that depends on culture. And for the purposes of answering your question, I'm going to assume that a person arrived illegally. Mm-hmm. But culturally, people from Central and South America pay a lot less money to their smuggler to enter the United States than somebody from China would. It's not unusual for somebody in China to spend over $100,000 to pay their smuggling debt to get to the United States.
Wow.
And they typically find themselves as indentured servants for 7 years working in restaurants under horrible conditions that wouldn't pass any Amnesty International report as far as humane living conditions, but they do so in order to pay off their debt. And normally, when we were very involved with Chinese immigration, we saw people that were just yoked with this debt, and they did nothing but work. These were people from the Fujian province of China, and normally they found work in Chinese restaurants across the country. Now, people from Central and South America that are entering the United States illegally, it's funny because they seem to assimilate. There's this misperception that they're not assimilating quickly, or they hold on to their cultures too long without becoming a fabric of the United States. But that's actually a misnomer, because they're doing all the jobs that we use every single day. They are our landscapers, they're busboys, waiters in our restaurants. They are working a lot in construction. Last year I had a rebuilt my house, and the entire crew that worked on my house, from the skilled mechanic all over to the laborer, they were all from Ecuador.
Mm-hmm.
So we see these people having jobs that would be a typical American job. And now what's happening is, and this is something that's going to be interesting to see where it develops over the next 10 years, but we're seeing more of these people who initially arrived illegally now getting the skilled jobs in America. And specifically in New York, we're seeing them being the mechanics on a construction job. They're not just the guy working the cement mixer. They're actually guy that's laying the foundation and being a mechanic on a job. So that's where we're seeing things happen now. But one point I want to make is the following, and this is something that the public really needs to be educated about. And Donald Trump said this last night when he won all those primaries, and this is the following. He keeps going back to illegal immigration. He keeps going back and saying, we're going to deport all these people. We're going to build this wall. We're going to make America great. We're going to get these jobs back. But there's something that Donald Trump's advisors really, really need to be aware of, and that's the Immigration and Nationality Act. It is the law that codifies 8 U.S. code that's written by Congress, and it has a vast array of laws that protect people once they're in the United States. When a person acquires equities in the United States, for instance, 10 years presence, payment of taxes, no serious convictions, and a qualifying relative, which would be a U.S. citizen or lawful permanent resident child that's under the age of 21, or spouse, parent that's a resident or a citizen of the United States who would suffer exceptional and extremely unusual hardship if this individual were deported, that person gets a green card. What Donald Trump and the tribe that's following him don't realize, that if he gets his way, and if he does in fact execute these laws that are supposed to be enforced, which, by the way, Neil, the DHS, Department of Homeland Security, doesn't have the manpower, it doesn't have the resources, doesn't have the capital to enforce the laws in the manner in which Donald Trump is suggesting. It's such rhetoric. It's truly rhetoric coming from somebody that has absolutely no understanding of this immigration vortex that we have in the United States. But his people that are voting for him don't want to hear it. But what the public needs to understand loud and clear is the following. You will get the opposite of what you want if you vote for Trump and he gets his way. Because the hardest time I have as an immigration lawyer is getting Immigration and Customs Enforcement to enforce the immigration laws. They can't do it because they don't have the manpower. It's impossible. I want enforcement because then that triggers individuals who have acquired equities that I've just described to request what's known as cancellation of removal, which will get them a green card. And it's not an amnesty. It's not a giveaway. It's something that's earned because this person has to have good moral character, which can only be achieved over the statutory required period, which is 10 years of continuous presence. That means, Neil, that a person cannot have a DWI, a driving while impaired. They can't have a domestic violence arrest. They have to be a person that has a clean record, who's willing to pay their taxes. And here's another problem that's not addressed by Donald Trump is the following. Once these individuals are in the system, they have to pay taxes in order to earn their green card. And the way it works is as follows. A person gets a work permit. He then gets a Social Security number. He can then come up with a payment plan to take care of his back taxes over the last 10 years. And that will allow that individual to then meet the good moral character standard in order to obtain a green card. And this, who would argue against having people added to the tax rolls that are going to generate revenue for the government? If 11 million people which is I believe, a very low estimate of the amount of people that are in the United States illegally right now. But if those 11 million people are able to pay taxes, and, the poverty level is $27,000 a year, these people are making at least that much. Do the math. That would be a huge spike in revenue that's being generated for the United States government, and it's going to be on an annual basis because these individuals cannot get relief unless they're able to establish that they've paid their taxes.
Right.
And it's not as if they don't have the equities of family members in the United States, because they do. They have a U.S. citizen or a lawful permanent resident, spouse, child, or parent.
Well, it's definitely an issue that you have to look at on an individual cases. I don't think it's a one size fits all for everybody. To say that we're going to remove anybody who's here illegally, like you say, we don't even have the means to be able to do that. So there's definitely certain cases which you obviously help these people with that you've talked about. So let's get into that for a moment. What exactly do you do to help them with these problems?
Well, we try to find relief, as you said, and I like the way you said it. It's not one size fits all. And immigration does use the phrase of case-by-case analysis, case-by-case basis of what relief matches this individual. The way it works is we have basic laws that have elements that have to be satisfied in order for an individual to gain that relief under that law. I had mentioned cancellation of removal, where a person has to establish 10 years presence, payment of taxes, no serious convictions, and a qualifying relative that would suffer hardship. Once an individual is placed into what we call removal proceedings, that's where Immigration and Customs Enforcement alleges an immigration violation that triggers this person to be deported. Then you could look into the Immigration Nationality Act and find which law is going to allow this person to remain here. Many, many people qualify for cancellation of removal, which is what I just described. Oftentimes you'll find people that fear persecution in their home country. Now, and then they could apply for what's known as political asylum. Persecution is not defined by Congress. An individual who fears persecution in their home country has to show that they fear that they'd be harmed on account of one of the 5 grounds for asylum, which would be they fear persecution on account of their race, their religion, membership in a particular social group, their nationality, or their political opinion. Most people fall within the particular social group category, and that's where we're seeing an incredible development, a very fast development in the law right now, where you have individuals that have something about them that's fundamental to their identity that they cannot change. They have to show as a result of that identity, if they returned home, they would be part of a narrow group of people that doesn't include everybody in their country. And as a result of that, they would be harmed, or on account of that, they would be harmed. So a lot of people that face deportation that are here illegally would have a viable asylum claim. We see a lot of it with women who fear domestic violence in their home country, young people who fear being deported on account of gang violence and gang recruitment in their home country. So asylum is something that is available. You see people who are gay that would be deported to countries where that's outlawed, and they would be part of a particular social group in that case. Transgenders would also fall under a particular social group, as would people who are family members. But the thing is this also, Neil, is that a lot of convictions, regardless of the age of the conviction, trigger deportation. So you'll have an individual that's here as a lawful permanent resident. That's what the public knows as a green card. It's one step below a citizen. Lawful permanent residents can stay in the United States as long as they want. They can work wherever they want. They can travel at will. They have really all the rights that U.S. citizens have, except they can't vote, and they can't remain outside the United States for more than a year, or else pardon me, or else that they would lose their residence.
Mm-hmm.
But lawful permanent residents find themselves in removal proceedings for draconian deportation laws that are triggered by convictions regardless of how old the conviction is. And it's sad because, oftentimes people would have a wild youth where, they made decisions at a young age that they wish they didn't make, and they found themselves with being arrested and convicted. But then later on, they got their act together and they became family men, or, they're women that became responsible. They paid their taxes. They've done all the right things to build a life here, and then they could be torn away from their families for mistakes that they made 20 years ago. I see that all the time, and that's really the tragedy.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of law out there that needs to be known or even needs to be changed. But what are a couple of misconceptions maybe about the services that you provide and the results that it may produce?
Yeah. Well, the most common misconception, and I hate to go back to people that support Donald Trump, but I see it a lot from them, is that immigration lawyers profit from illegal immigration. Nothing could be further from the truth, Neil. Immigration lawyers only are able to make a living when there's enforcement of our immigration laws. So the misconception is that as an immigration lawyer, I'm an advocate for illegal immigration, and that's not the case at all. If there's no enforcement, then that individual has no need for my services. The basic premise with a sale, right, Neil? We're businessmen. We know this. Mm-hmm. You can't sell something to somebody who doesn't need your services. If there's no need, there's no desire, and there's no urgency. So therefore, there's no business for me. So what the public needs to understand is that immigration lawyers, in general, encourage enforcement, and we encourage the enforcement of the immigration laws because then we could step in to fulfill people's needs that would otherwise face deportation if they were unrepresented.
And how about from the point of view of the illegals that are here right now? What misconceptions do they have when they walk into your office?
They often want guarantees. They're used to being taken advantage of. Back home, a lot of the times you see people that are hustled. A lot of times people think if I pay off the right guy, why can't I get what I want? So, two misconceptions. One, people want a guarantee, and they want to know that if I pay you the money, you're going to deliver that which you promise. And that's impossible. A lawyer cannot run an ethical practice if he gives guarantees, and we're not permitted to do that. I'm not allowed to give a guarantee when the decision lies in the hands of an adjudicator, if it's from Citizenship and Immigration Services, or an immigration judge, if I have to go to court. So people that come in to see me want guarantees, and we can't give them. The other misconception that people who come in and see me is that it's one of trust. They have a big trust problem, and that's why when people come in and see me, the first thing I do is build trust. Everybody that comes into my office gets a copy of my biography. It gives people a list of all my credentials, all the courts in the United States where I'm licensed to be a lawyer, a bibliography of all the articles I've written on the subject, and it's numerous. Numerous published decisions that I've won in federal courts across the country, so that people have a certain level of comfort when they follow the advice that I'm going to give them. Those are the two biggest misconceptions, is that people have to understand that there are no guarantees, and when you come in and see a lawyer, you got to be able to trust that lawyer. But here's another one that I want to add that's a misconception that the public also needs to understand. And that is that people need to know that you must be truthful with immigration at all times. There's a misconception that if you tell immigration what they want to hear, or if you conspire with a notario, that's someone who practices law without a license, unauthorized practice of law, or if you find a lawyer who's dishonest that's willing to play ball with you and commit fraud, people think that the immigration game could be won by committing fraud. And this is what rears its ugly head, because I am objective, Neil, when I'm handling cases. And before I accept a case, I look at it through the lens of an immigration judge or an immigration officer, and whether I'm convinced that this person has a viable claim, whether it has merit. Because people think, and I'm talking, and it's culturally, it's a cross-cultural belief that immigration lawyers are willing to commit fraud in order to gain their client a benefit with immigration. And nothing could be further from the truth, because a lawyer can't do that. And in fact, we're scrutinized so carefully as immigration lawyers that in our advocacy, we must be sure that we don't sway the facts to such an extent that it borders on fraud. We're not permitted to do that. I'm allowed to use the law in my favor. I'm allowed to be persuasive. I'm allowed to present the facts in the light most favorable to my client to get the result I want. But at all times, people have this misconception that immigration lawyers are going to profit from fraud, and nothing could be further from the truth.
I'm glad that you brought up trust, because when people trust you, obviously that's one of the biggest things to increase your authority. But on the other side as well, if they're not being trustworthy and giving the correct answers to the immigration people, then one lie leads to another, and then you get yourself in even more trouble. So the thing I like about the trust is that you do a great job of educating people. Now, tell me a little bit about the education that you do. I believe you are on television as well.
I am. And the public, and here's the way I do it. We run our practice a lot differently than most law firms. And our cornerstone is education. And what I do is I'll see many, many people during the day to whom I give consultations. And I'll group people together, and I'll give a general consultation in mass, and then I'll individually see people to identify problems they may have on a case-by-case basis to see what I can do to help them. But it's very, very important that lawyers educate clients and make them aware of the relief they're pursuing for that person. So what we do is, and I'm also representing a very vulnerable part of the community. These are people that have been taken advantage of by predatory practices from non-lawyers. People are practicing law without a license. They've been targets of predators from the time they lived in their country to when they came to the United States. You got to remember, Neil, I got people that are exploited by their employers and not getting paid the wages that they should be getting. I have people that are exploited, and how they came to the United States, and they've been ripped off every opportunity to get ripped off. And they're a vulnerable segment because, number one, they're afraid. Number two, they want to hear. They're told what they want to hear. So what I do is I educate people on exactly what I want to do for them. I give them articles that are in English that are translated in their language, where I've been published on the subject, so they can see that not only am I explaining to them what I'm doing for them, but I give them the actual law so they see that it's not just coming off the top of my head. There's support for what I'm telling them. We have social group asylum that I mentioned earlier. The reason why we have that definition is a case I won in the Second Circuit, Gashi, Gashi versus Holder, where I challenged the definition of particular social group to be a three-part test, which is the fundamental part of you that can't be changed, part of your identity, belonging to a group of people that doesn't include everybody in your country, and harm. I give the citation to the cases I've won that support what I say. So when people leave my office, I test them if they know exactly what we're doing for them when they leave my office. And you know what's really funny? Two things. Number one, nobody ever remembers their lawyer's name that has an immigration lawyer. The next time you speak to somebody that has an immigration lawyer, Neil, ask them who their lawyer is. I'll bet you dollars to donuts they don't remember the guy's name.
No.
So what I do is I reinforce what my name is to these people that I help and see every day. I give them my card, and I tell them what to do with my card. In the Asian culture, when you give somebody your card, your business card, they hold it in the palm of their hand and they study it before they put it in their pocket. What I see with my Hispanic clients or clients from Latin America and Central America, when I give them my card, they hold on to it, and they're so nervous when I'm interviewing them that by the time they're done manhandling the card, it's useless to them. So I tell people, listen, when I give you my card, put it away, because later on when you need it, you want it to be in such a condition that's going to be useful to you.
Right.
So educating people about what lawyers do, educating people about our credentials, and educating individuals on how we're going to assist them is crucial in an immigration practice.
And it all starts with a consultation. So, Ray, you've given us some great advice and making us aware of a lot of the issues that people are having in the country today after they're getting here illegally. How does somebody contact you to get help from your practice?
Well, my email is hrfasano@ymflaw.com, HR, F as in Frank, A, S as in Sam, ANO, at Y as in yellow, M, F as in Frank, law.com, hrfasano@ymflaw.com. They could visit our website, ymflaw.com. You'll see my biography and all my credentials and my blog on there. That is a timely blog. They could contact our office at 212-791-7791, 212-791-7791. If people want to Google me, what I would suggest is you put in quotations, quote, H period, Raymond, and my last name, Fasano, F as in Frank, A, S as in Sam, ANO, close quotes. Google me. You'll see all the stuff that I've done nationally, and then people can contact me. Now, here's what's important. Everybody knows somebody who needs immigration assistance. Everybody goes to a deli. Everybody goes to a restaurant. Everyone gets their house cleaned. Women get their nails done. Everybody that gives us these services, we endear ourselves to them. I know that, the guy who works on my house, who's my landscaper, very close to him, the guy who works on my pool. These are people that offer us such services to such an extent that they provide with such pride and such skill that we do want to reach out for them and help them. I don't understand this immigration backlash that we're seeing over the last couple of years, where people are just so repulsed and they find it repugnant that there's illegal immigration in the United States. But you talk to anybody who knows somebody who is here as an immigrant, either legally or illegally, and they endear themselves to them because of the services that they provide. So the next time you go to the deli and there's a guy that's pouring you a cup of coffee, next time you're getting your nails done, ask that person from what country they are, and I'll bet you any amount of money that I'll be able to find a way to help them. And it's not just and here's another thing I want to tell you, Neil. I'm a businessman, okay? I am a for-profit lawyer, but I do a tremendous amount of pro bono as well. That's where we have a certain criteria in our office for individuals where we provide free legal services. Some of my biggest victories have been in pro bono cases because I think as lawyers, we absolutely have an obligation to provide pro bono services when people need us the most. And you know something, Neil, when I do a case pro bono, I'm actually paying that person for me to handle them because I still got to pay my associate to work on the case. I still got to pay all my clerks and staff to offer all the support that's necessary on the case. So when I do a case pro bono, it really ought to be me paying that person to do the case because it's still costing me out of pocket. I don't get any fellowships or grants from the federal government to handle pro bono work.
Well, I certainly hear the passion. I love the fact that you are out to educate people and you are making a huge difference with all the education that you give out, along with all the people that you see in your office. I really appreciate the time that you have given me today, and I have enjoyed it very much.
Thank you very much, Neil.
Well, thank you very much for listening, ladies and gentlemen. If you like what you hear, please hit that like button or share, and we will see you next time on the show.
Thanks for listening to Business Innovators Radio. To hear all episodes featuring leading industry influencers and trendsetters, visit us online at businessinnovatorsradio.com today.